So here we are at the beginning of a whole new week. And we're going to continue with this whole picture and understanding of who is Jesus and what the gospel is all about. Some people have asked me, why are we repeating over and over again lots of stuff? Well, repetition is what ultimately is going to change the way we think and feel. And so this is part of the big story we need to get our heads around. And so we're going to say the Jesus creed together, and then we are going to begin to ask that simple question: who is this Jesus we never knew, and what is the simple good news? Right, let's say it together. Hear, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There are no commands greater than these. Here is the next part of our exploration of who Jesus is.
Thank you very much. It's a surprise and a delight to be here. Google for me is something that comes up on the screen, and actually thinking of it as a place, never mind a campus, never mind people, is kind of blowing my mind right now, and I'm very happy about that. I'm also happy about the fact that whereas in my previous job when I was Bishop of Durham, almost every church meeting I went to, I significantly reduced the average age of those present. I think now I'm significantly increasing the average age of those. I suspect I'm at least twice as old as most of you here in this room, and I'm very happy about that. It reminds me that I'm on my way to retirement and to listening to music and playing on the golf course and so on. But at the moment I'm still bouncing around talking about God and Jesus and the Bible and church and the world and culture and what we should be doing in our culture. And since you people are part of the people who are shaping the way that people, not only what people think about, but the way people think, what I want to try to do today is to put out some parameters to do with how I think the gospel, the Christian good news, actually works, and then to reflect just a little on what being human within that good news might look like, and what as humans we ought to be doing in order to engage with the wider world in a way which is wise and honest and actually deeply Christian. The idea of Christians engaging with the world at all has often been at a discount. People think, well, I don't really belong in this world, I have a spiritual identity, I'm off someplace else, and actually that is deeply unbiblical, deeply untrue to the Jewish and Christian vision. I'll explain in a moment. But let me say one or two things about good news. I have a book coming out, which has just come out, called simply Good News. I'm not sure it's actually as simple as some people think, but I'm trying to make it simple. But the main message of that book is that, contrary to popular imagination, the Christian message is good news, not good advice. And there is all sorts of difference between news and advice. And news is a funny sort of thing. I mean, many people think you go to church in order to get good advice about how to live. Well, maybe you do, but that's not the main point. Or good advice about how to reorder your private spirituality. Well, that, again, may happen, but that's not the whole point of it. Or even good advice about which technique to be sure you plug into so that after your death you go to the right destination. Well, again, that seems pretty important, but that sounds like advice rather than news. News is about something that happens as a result of which the world is a different place, often in ways that people don't expect, sometimes in ways that they don't want. You all know where you were on September the 11th, 2001. I bet you don't know where you were on November the 22nd, 2003. I know exactly where I was. I was in a hotel room in Atlanta, Georgia, and I phoned home at 5 in the morning because the television screens were not showing the event that I wanted to see, which was the final of the Rugby World Cup, because England were playing Australia in Australia, and nothing Australians like more than to beat the British at one of their sports. So I was naturally, England had made it to the final, astonishingly. So I was on pins to find out, and I knew my daughter would be glued to the television. So I phoned her at the appointed hour. Oh, Dad, it's terrible. It's got to full time and the score is 17 all and they have to play another half hour and it's all very tense. And so I got up and I paced around and I waited for half an hour and I phoned her again and, hey, yay, we won. And the last kick of the match, Johnny Wilkinson, who was the poster boy of English rugby, had done a drop goal. And as a result, England had won and Australia were decimated. And then I had a dilemma. I was in a semi-dark hall in a hotel in Atlanta, Georgia, and I wanted to go up and hug the hall porter and say, "Did you hear we won the World Cup?" And I wrote, he probably doesn't know what rugby is. He may not even know where Australia is, let alone anything else. And I sort of wanted to tell the checking clerks, did you hear the news? This means nothing to them whatever. And I was waiting for somebody to come downstairs to the conference who knew that there had been a game going on. And finally somebody did, and it was an Australian. So I had this good news, which was foolishness to the Americans, scandalous to the Australians, but for those of us who believed, it made us happy. It made us happy all year. And one of the effects was hundreds, thousands of little English boys and at least hundreds of little English girls wanted to be Johnny Wilkinson when they grew up and would be practicing drop goals in the schoolyard. Something had happened as a result of which everything looked different. Now, of course, in sport, that doesn't last. We haven't been one of my Australian friends who read this book and saw that I used that story up front sent me a rude email saying, "You wait, you won't be using too many more of those stories. We'll get you." I did actually send it, when it happened, I sent him an email congratulating the Australians on being such good losers, and he sent one straight back here saying, "Yeah, considering how little practice we have at it, at losing, that is." But you see, news is about something that's happened as a result of which the world is a different place, and as a result of which things kind of fracture. Some people say, this doesn't make any sense in our world. Other people say, this makes all the wrong kind of sense in my world. But some people find that it transforms their lives. And in the early Christian world, that's what happened. How did it transform their lives? What was going on? Well, the gospel, the good news, is a message about Jesus. But so many people have put that message within an implicit backstory, which makes it different from how the early Christians saw it. You see, my backstory was that I'd been following English rugby since the days when, believe it or not, I played rugby myself as a teenager. I've been interested in what they're doing, following them. I knew the backstory. The Australians knew their backstory, and those two were going to clash. The Americans in Atlanta had no backstory at all, no interest, didn't mean a thing. I might as well go out on the street in St Andrews and say that, I don't know, Duke have beaten Caltech at basketball or something. You know, people just aren't terribly interested in St Andrews. I'm sorry about that. What's the backstory? The backstory for so many people, both inside the church and outside, goes like this: that there is this dangerous God somewhere up in the sky. Maybe we're not sure, but if there is, he's dangerous. He's made a very high moral bar which he wants us all to jump over. We've all failed to jump over that moral bar, so he's out to get us. But then at the last minute, fortunately, somebody else steps in the way, takes the hit in our place. Phew, so it's all right. And it happens to be his own son. So somehow that's okay. Now, I have not yet found a preacher who admits to having preached the gospel like that, but I know many, many people in many, many churches for whom that is what they've actually heard. That's what they think more or less the message is about.
So I hope you saw the difference between how many of us read the Bible and in fact how we should read the Bible. Many of us have been brought up that the Bible is a textbook. In fact, it is the textbook for life. Many of us have been told that we can find practical advice on how to go about doing day-to-day things in our lives within the Bible. But in fact, the Bible is the story of how God has ultimately become king. That event in history, the death, resurrection, the life, the birth of Jesus, that has brought so many strands to a climax. And you and I, we live in the post time after that, and how we go about doing life now that God is king. And when we get that understanding, and we're shaped by that big idea, that actions, what we do underneath, begins to differ in terms of that. How we go about doing day-to-day life begins to change. And so it is so important that we understand what good news is. Good news is an event that happened in history. The life, death, resurrection of Jesus. And because of that, the world is now a different place. And his people, you and I, the church, go about doing life differently because of what has happened. And so, as we explore the good news, as we explore what it's all about, we need to get our heads around that simple and key fact that the Bible is not a textbook for life. It is not an advice given manual on how to do day-to-day things. It is not a moral code that we buy into and that we follow. But in fact, it is the story of how God becomes king. And so as we explore that a bit further tomorrow, and we dive into a little bit more around Jesus and who he is and what he is about, let's get excited, because we're part of a story that is so much bigger than just ourselves. Right, we're going to pray, and then we're going to enjoy the rest of our day. Let's pray together. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive